now imagine if I keep telling the students, I guess my students will be bored, get bored. So I need to do something new to add some spice, to add variety to my classroom. So I think that probably I got to bring technology to my classroom. So I got to teach with video. In other words, some of the stories, not every one of my stories came from the text. Some of my stories came from songs. Some of my stories came from YouTube clips, YouTube film clips. So I like to give you several examples. Whoever finds this, I love it. It was a beautiful song sung by Qi Yu. Okay, it was a story about friendship between an old man and an orphan. Students just love the melody of the song. Okay, next, after 20 years, and the gift of Magi. Both of them are from O. Henry's works. So after students watched the YouTube films, they got a general idea of the story because the narrator had beautiful voice and clearly narrated the story. So it boosted my students' interest and boosted their motivation. Okay, so after listening to the stories, I also have to do some post-listening activities. What are some post-listening activities I use? First, split listening. What is split listening means I divided my class into two groups. The first group is composed of students sitting in rows 1, 3, 5. The second group was students sitting in rows 2, 4, 6. Then the second group was asked to leave the classroom and stay outside reading their own stories. The first group stayed in the classroom. They came to the front, they gathered in the front, listening to me telling the story. After my story was done, the second group was called into the classroom, and the first group is responsible for telling the story to their partners. Okay, next, the 4-3-2 approach. What is 4-3-2 approach? To set the 4-3-2. I arrange my students in rows facing each other. That's very important. You've got to make your students face each other. So, first of all, I told my students after they're watching the video, listen to the story on the video, I asked them, okay, first of all, you talk to your partner. Okay? By the way, rows 1, 3, 5 are speakers this time. They are definitely speakers. And rows 2, 4, 6 are listeners. So speakers go first. Okay, speakers start to tell their story within 4 minutes. When I signal time's up, then all the speakers had to move down one place and tell the same story to a new partner. Okay, this time I was given them 3 minutes. Okay, after this, then all the speakers moved down one place again, then telling the same story, I repeat, the same story to another new partner. Okay, the principle behind this approach is that repetition will definitely bring about fluency. Okay, next approach, the ever-increasing dialogue. Okay, the ever-increasing dialogue is that every student can find their own partner, their conversational partner. And then ever-increasing means I give them more and more time. So the first speaker, the first student, you have to talk about anything. But there are 2 rules that you've got to follow. They have to keep talking without stopping, okay, until I say time is up. And then everything they talk about should be related to the story they just watched or they just listened to. Okay, in my class, I give students 1 minute to talk about it first, and then when they switch to another partner, I give them 2 minutes, and then I give them 3 minutes. Okay, this is a very excellent activity because I found it's a very challenging and a great activity to wrap up your English class. Okay, next, word hunt is much easier. Okay, for example, I had my students listen to the Gift of Magi, and then I played it the first time to help them get a general idea of the story. Then I played the film clips again. Okay, now this time, listen for all the adjectives and write them down. So it's much easier. Okay, now this is a picture I took from my class. Okay, this is a different activity. We watch a video because we talk about Charlie Chaplin's, the article about Charlie Chaplin. So I had them watch the movie Modern Times, just for a little short part. After watching the movie, I asked them to discuss and talk about the story. And then, okay, remember, her, look at the girl, okay, the rightmost student, remember her. I will talk about her later. Okay, so now students have practiced their speaking or listening activities. Now I've got to, don't forget, I have to help them improve their thinking abilities, their critical thinking. So what exercise did I do? Of course, everybody knows. I asked them some questions after listening story. For example, what do you think? What would become the main character? If you were the character, if you were the main character, what would you do? Would you like the ending? Next, create the ending. Okay, take the story, the lady or title, for example. The story didn't give us a satisfactory ending. So I asked students, what do you think? Which would come out the door? The lady or the tiger? Okay, keeping a reflection journal. Okay, here, for example, last November, a superstorm hit New York City. Then, I got a news report from CNN. It says a young mother lost her 2 sons. She saw her 2 sons swept away by the superstorm. When they were in danger, she asked for help. She turned to a stranger for help, but the man rejected to help. So, afterwards, she lost her 2 sons. In other words, after this event, I guess a lot of people interviewed the men. They reported stories from the mother's side and from the man's side. And I asked my students, what do you think of the event? So, this is the response from my students. She said, I believe the mother. And blah, blah, blah. And she said, on the contrary, the man might feel alive to cover his fault. According to the mother saying, the man's behavior is seeing part of this. Anyway, she expressed her thoughts on this event. Okay, let's move on to the second problem. The second question you might have. What are the criteria for me? What are the criteria I used to choose appropriate stories? There are tons of stories. Well, what criteria, what guidelines did I follow? Story selection. Okay, my principles are, is the story short enough? I think the shorter the better. Because if the story is too long, then students have trouble concentrating on that to let you finish your story. So I think that the length should be, the brevity should take into consideration. Okay, next is easy to follow. If the story has too many difficult words, I would rewrite it. I would change words. I would like to tell story in a conversational style. Next, a limited cast for storyteller. A limited cast is very, very important. If the story involves too many characters, I guess both listeners and the speakers will lose track of the story. And I don't think that the storyteller can finish story complete. Okay, next. Interesting conflicts or problems. Are conflicts or problems the story interesting to teenagers? Is the tension building up as the story develops? Okay, next. Does the story have a surprising or twisted ending? That's very important. The ending decides the success of the story. So I usually see if whether my story is successful or not from my students' facial expression. They give me the prompt feedback. Okay, method is story bank. So far, I've done a lot of storytelling sessions. So I collected a lot of good short stories. Surprisingly, it has become a very valuable asset in my teaching career. Okay, what type of stories I've used? Online stories or jokes. Personal anecdotes. To my surprise, my personal stories that happen to in my daily lives are equally appealing. For example, I told my students a beggar cheated me out of money. And I saw an elegant lady dressed very, very elegantly store bread from a nearby bakery. Okay, I share with my personal stories with them. It's appealing. It's interesting too. Of course, news stories, just like I mentioned, from CNN news reports, and literary works from O. Henry's works. So, okay, now at the end of last semester, I was very nervous because I really want to see how effective my storytelling unit works. So I designed a questionnaire to evaluate the students' response to the activity I did in the classroom, focusing on what they enjoyed most and what benefits they felt they had received. take a question 12, for example. Okay, this is in the second part of my questionnaire. In what ways do you think you most benefit from the storytelling activity? My listening has improved. My speaking has improved. I'm more motivated than before. I can think more clearly about issues in the stories. I have started to develop an interest in short stories. So can you guess what the responses I collected? So I got the result. Okay. It's not perfect, but it's satisfactory. Out of 38 students, I collected 38 responses from my students, but I've discounted the survey of one student because he stepped throughout my class and he gave 3. He remained neutral on all my statements, which I don't think are reliable, which it doesn't seem reliable to my result analysis. And out of 38, 30 students checked my listening has improved. So obviously, students did think that their listening has improved. 23 students checked, I can think more clearly. So in other words, I give students opportunities to boost their thinking. Next, 10 students checked, I've started to develop interest in short stories. 9 students checked, I'm more motivated. So these 2 figures give me a message that one of my purposes is to raise students' literary awareness. So in some way, okay, students began to love short stories. So I just opened the door. I think I opened the window to the world. Okay, give them opportunities to appreciate different cultural diversity. And next, 4 students checked my speaking has improved. What a shame. Okay, the number clearly present that my students didn't think that their speaking has improved. You know why? Because we have a very, very tight teaching schedule. So most of the time, I just did it very short. So I cut a lot of speaking activities. So that's why. So probably my students didn't feel that I give them enough opportunities to practice speaking. I think in the future, if I continue doing this, I will really improve. The way how I conduct this activity. Okay, my observations. Okay, 2 of my most inattentive students, I guess 1 student is really helpless because he stepped throughout my class. Okay, I just ignore him. I'm sorry, I have to ignore him. But the other 2 students, they are very inattentive and disruptive. They couldn't remain sitting on their seats. But surprisingly, during my storytelling session, they listened to me. They looked into my eyes. They tried to clarify their misunderstandings. So I was impressed. And next, did you remember the girl I showed you on the right most? Yeah. Even she was the shyest student. She was reluctant to say anything in front of class. But anyway, she made a breakthrough. In my reflections, just like the third part, what challenges lay in wait? Searching for appropriate material, it took me a lot of time. I realized how difficult to be an English teacher. It's a challenging task. You got to be prepared that if you want to do this, you have to spend a lot of time searching for information. But at the same time, I think my reading speed has improved because I have to be very fast. Okay, next, abridging and rewriting stories. Wow, that's a challenge to my writing skills. If you saw, for example, O. Henry, that's beautiful literary works. How could I make this story short? How could I maintain the beauty of his works? So it challenged to me. But at the same time, I consider it challenging because I can improve my writing. I kept writing a lot. Okay, next, honing the skill of telling stories. Imagine, we are not native speakers. So telling a story in a foreign language is intimidating. It's a demanding task. But I challenge myself. To become a better storyteller. So I've got to continue polishing my skills of speaking, of telling stories. Okay, cheers, everybody. I hope you can enjoy my presentation. But before I end my presentation, I'd like to show you a clip from my class. Okay, to see the activity in action. But since time is limited, so I will just play 1 or 2 minutes.